This is a video game crossover between Prototype franchise and the God of War franchise, right? So both franchises, they're very gruesome, they're very brutal, they're very bloody, very fun action adventure games. Now, the genre for these games, they're slightly different. Prototype is like an open world style game with action. A God of War, the earlier God of War games were straight action adventure, hack and slash. But like in gameplay similarity wise, it does have that, similar action gameplay, melee gameplay. It's gonna be like a little difficult because there's like 9 God of War games and there's only 2 prototype games. But in terms of power set, power levels, the enemies, the epicness, it'd be very cool to see a crossover. And I keep in mind this is just like an idea. So like for this crossover, right? The crossover wise for the gameplay, it's gonna be very similar to those early God of War games. It's gonna be like a hack and slash kind of adventure game, right? A God of War 1, God of War 2, God of War 3, God of War, Ghost of Sparta, etc. And for the sake of the crossover, it's gonna be Alex Mercer and the Greek Kratos. Now, through skins is gonna be skins as well. You can add, the Norse Kratos if you like that Kratos, or Fear Kratos, etc. So starting off now, like with this scenario, right? So, if you're familiar like with the Prototype franchise, so Alex Mercer, right, and Kratos from God of War, they're stranded on sort of hell or some sort of stranded realm, and they have to fight enemies continuously to make it to the next stage, in the next area, right? You're fighting enemies in multiple waves, and it kind of goes like from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and certain stages where it's where you could kind of choose to play as Mercer or Kratos and choose a certain power set that's more suited towards a traversal, super speed, etc. These crossover, there's so many different possibilities. You could bring back Ares, so Ares could manipulate like these evil scientists, and the scientists could create, like some sort of new strain of, the Blacklight virus, like from Prototype, or like some new evolved strain, right? So Ares, someone like Ares or Hades could be brought back. And, you're gonna have Kratos and Alex Mercer working out together to kind of overcome these challenges and enemies. And power sets, right? So they're gonna be stranded, but they're gonna have access to all their powers. Alex Mercer, he's gonna have access to, obviously, super speed, run up walls, superhuman durability, which Kratos also has. Super strength, Kratos also has. Now, Alex Mercer does have, some weird abilities like shape-shifting. He can shape-shift. He's able to shape-shift his hands into like these dangerous kind of weapons, offensive weapons, the claws, the blades, the whip fists, later on through a dream cellar, tendrils, muscle mass, hammer fist, etc. Kratos as well, he's gonna have access to all of his weapons. You can kind of customize a loadout or some sort of weapon loadout like for each character. But for example, the Nemesis Whip, the Nemeum Cestus, the Blades of Exile, the Blades of Chaos, the Soul Blades, etc. He's gonna have access to all of his magic abilities throughout the franchise, right? Rage abilities, and as well the most recent weapons like in the Norse saga, right? A Leviathan axe and the spear. So as I said before, this is gonna be very bloody. They're going to be working together, and the enemies in this crossover, they're going to be very detailed. God of War is known for having lots of enemy designs. The Minotaur, the Cyclops, the, Chimera, the Gorgon Serpent, the Sirens, right? 2 are the Norse saga, right? So, where you had Wolfers, Draugrs, Dreki, Trolls, etc., right? Lots of different enemies, Hellwalkers, etc. To a mini boss, to actual bosses, Hercules, Balder, etc. So it's not having lots of enemies. But for the enemies of the crossover, it's gonna be like a mix between. It's gonna bring back some old enemies, like for example, like from God of War 3, or Prototype. For example, one has the Leader Hunter, or Elizabeth Green type enemies. Prototype 2 had the Evolved. They're like prototypes like you, right? So they're very similar. They have a very similar power set to you. But the power sets of the characters, they're gonna really, the enemies are gonna really, depend. Some enemies might have cloaking. Other enemies will have, super strength. Other enemies like will teleport. Other enemies will have super speed. Other enemies will drain you of certain magic abilities. So there's all sorts of different possibilities like with enemies, big enemies, enemies that can swarm, that will swarm you in a group, and you gotta use crowd control abilities. So enemies, there's lots of different possibilities like with enemies. And as you get further and further into the crossover, you kind of, encounter more powerful enemies, more powerful villains, more powerful mini bosses, etc. Right? And it really, again, it's gonna make the gameplay more and more interesting, and you gotta adapt at a certain scenarios differently. I could see an enemy like from DC, the Justice League villain known as Amazo, right? Or a villain like, for example, Super Skrull, right? So let's say if you have like a villain equivalent after this, right? So you could have a villain that can mimic your powers as like a main boss in a certain stage or a chapter, and it can get very very interesting. And with all the power set Kratos has access to, Alex Mercer has access to, James Heller, right, with all their feats and speed feats, etc. It's gonna really be useful like in these types of scenarios. You could even implement some sort of point system for certain specific enemies that you kill, special enemies that you kill that give you more points, right? Or if it's like a co-op system, you could implement like a co-op system where players obviously I could choose to either play as Mercer, Kratos, or like some other character throughout the lore, of either game, James Heller or a Deimos, for example. Deimos, which is Kratos' brother, which can get very interesting. And yeah, so there's lots of different ways how it could go in the bosses, mini bosses, enemies. You could have swarm of enemies, invisible kind of enemies, mimicking enemies, stealth based enemies, etc. And also as well, the thing about this crossover is gonna be again the gruesomeness, the brutality. Just imagine Mercer and Kratos in like some sort of in working out together. It's gonna be so brutal as they rip enemies apart, slice through enemies, slice enemies in two. There's a lot of, in terms of abilities, both of them have like a semi-similar ability. With Kratos is more of a magic absorption, right, or some sort of weapon. He's able to absorb the energy of certain weapons. With Mercer, he absorbs biomass, right, and he does give him more XP, more abilities. So through a consumption of Mercer or a magic absorption of Kratos, they kill certain enemies, certain bosses. Once you kill them, I will give you newer moves, newer upgrades, abilities, etc. Super moves. And speaking of super moves, different types. So obviously the various different types of magic meter attacks that Kratos have, that he has, shown throughout the series, and a rage meter like in the Norse saga, right? A Devastator like in Prototype, the Devastator, the Spike Strip Devastator, right? The ground spike, a Devastator, etc. So with the super moves, super attacks, you can even implement more and more like newer super moves, super attacks the more you play the game. And visually, you could imagine, in terms of presentation, visuals, and sound design, you could imagine just how bloody is gonna look on screen, or how vicious and brutal is gonna look. And graphics wise, it's gonna be very very it's gonna look very new and very modern style game. And keep in mind, as with all the crossover, it is an idea, it's just a concept. But just imagine. The replayability of the game is gonna really depend on the amount of levels in the game, the difficulty, so how difficult it is throughout playing the game. There'll be like like an easy, medium, hard, very hard style a difficulty approach, right? So depending like on how you want to play, right? There will be replayability in skins. So certain skins, similar to God of War 3, are God of War games, which will give you skins as a replayability bonus. So like when you or some sort of new game plus bonus. So you can play a new game plus bonus, and whether it be through Alex Mercer or Kratos, and they get certain buffs, specific buffs that can make the second playthrough unique and different. They could give enemies. There's a weird. Some enemies have it where they do
twice as much damage, and you as well do twice as much damage. So it's kind of like a double kind of a negative positive feature, right? Which is like a pretty interesting cheat code, like with the uniform bonus. Also, as well, there will be challenges, right? So challenges associated like with this crossover, right? So whether you want to play as Mercer or Kratos, there could be speed challenges, time trial challenges, strength based, trials, a destruction based trials, crowd control based trials. So there's going to be lots of different challenges, or some sort of arcade style mode, right? That can really spice up, right, the replayability of the game. So all in all, I had like a very fun time making like this crossover video. Comment down below crossovers or kind of a video game or a merger ideas, right? So please like, share, subscribe, share the video all over. Thank you.